I understand better than I want to admit why people get frustrated with the pace of change, with the lack of change, and they feel this compulsion to take things into their own hands. When we do that, when we're frustrated, angry, fed up, and decide to take things into our own hands, we'll fight. We'll bear our arms. We will bear arms. We'll pick up guns. We'll go to battle. We will align ourselves with like-minded people. We will form militias. We will form mobs. We will form parties. And we will come against our perceived enemies because we want change. I understand it because that appeals to our base human nature. It appeals to our selfish interests. And Satan whispers in our ear, if you want it, fight for it. If you want it to change, make it change. You do it. You confront your enemy. You confront your adversary. You confront your antagonist. You back them into a corner. You overwhelm them. You intimidate them. You get what you want. I understand it. I have more trouble understanding Jesus gathering that group of disciples around him, and he started teaching. And he told them about this life that he wanted them to embrace. We call them the Beatitudes. Blessed are the, blessed are the, blessed are the, blessed are the. And as he began to outline this blessed life, this fulfilled life, this life that finds the favor of God, you know what was lacking in that? There was no call to arms. There was no rattling of the sabers. There was no firing up the base to get them to go and confront Rome, or even to storm the local temple where the Pharisees were holed up and get them to relinquish control of that said temple or synagogue. There was none of that. Poor in spirit, those who mourn. And on he went. And it seemed as if he was encouraging them to knuckle under, to submit to give themselves over to other authorities and other powers, and to be content in following him. He was very specific about what that was going to look like. But that was the challenge, not to bear arms, not to gather together and take on Rome or take on the leadership in organized religion, but to just humbly trust him and to walk with him. Hunger and thirst after righteousness. Take the consequences of being faithful and obedient to Jesus Christ. Blessed are you, blessed are you, blessed are you, blessed are you. It sounds as if he is creating this mealy-mouthed bunch of weak people who can't do any better, who have no other options but to embrace this firebrand of alternative religion because they have no other place to go. He is their last resort. They're going to dutifully follow him behind him and be this eclectic gathering of weirdos who have no other place to go. And that was the nucleus of the New Testament church. An eclectic group of weirdos. Now that would describe a lot of Baptist churches, I will tell you that. An eclectic group of weirdos. Strange folk who for whatever reason have been drawn together. And so, you would think at the end of that, he would have said, now bless your hearts. That's how we started when we were about to give some bad news. Now bless your hearts. Y'all, if y'all take this out into the world, you're going to get bullied. You're going to get some bloody noses and black eyes. So probably the best thing for you to do is to keep this among yourselves. Y'all talk about it. You encourage one another with these words, but don't make a big deal of it, because if you do, you're going to have problems. I mean, they're not going to like you, and you're going to get hurt. So just kind of keep this on the down low, and one day it'll pay off for you. That's logically, where he should have gone next. Logically, what he should have challenged them with next. This is not going to be easy. Do your best. Keep it to yourself so as not to incur any unnecessary harm to you or your family. Shockingly, appallingly, we come to verse 13 in Matthew chapter 5. And then Jesus looks at that eclectic group of weirdos, that growing band of would-be disciples, looks them in the eye and says to them, verse 13 of Matthew 5, "You are the salt of the earth. But if the salt has become tasteless, how can it be made salty again? It's no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot by men. You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden, nor does anyone light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on the lampstand, and it gives light to all who are in the house. Let your light shine before men in such a way that they may see your good works and glorify your Father who is in heaven." Now, I saw it coming because I've read the Bible. But if I'm on the side of the hill listening to him teach and preach, I wouldn't have seen that coming. That didn't fit with where we've been. Poor in spirit, mourning, gentle, going to be persecuted, going to be reviled, hungering and thirsting for righteousness. Whew, this is going to be tough sledding, and we just need to encourage one another, circle the wagons, and hold on until the end, however that's going to come. And instead, he says, "You are," and challenges them. I love the way this dovetails with where we are in 1st and 2nd Peter, and even with what I preached about this morning. Because Peter challenged that group of believers, that church in that first century setting, not to just go with their first impulse, not to go with what seemed right and best for them in the moment, not to go with the fleshly response to the circumstances, finding the easy way, the most expedient way. He challenged them to remember whose they were and to appreciate the fact that God had equipped them for a godly life, this life. So Jesus now describes what that looks like, and you are going to be, and the first thing he describes for us is the fact that he wants us not to be cloistered away in a convent, though there are those who feel called to the convent, that we're not to hide behind the high walls of a monastery, keeping the world out there and us in here. We're not to go off and buy an island somewhere. And this to me is the most appealing idea yet. I think buying an island in the Caribbean, where it's warm, and you've got these warm ocean breezes blowing all year long, and the temperature is fairly constant. You've got a good supply of fresh water. You've got fresh fruit. You can make your own rules. If God had just said, "Look, when you get saved and you get right with me, I'm going to send you to the island." Doesn't that sound like a good thing? And it would be big enough, because God knows how many would respond. So it would be a big enough island to hold everybody who got saved. And then we could just go and live the island life until the second coming. And then we go to heaven. I mean, that's kind of like heaven on training wheels on the island. And then we get to go to real heaven. No, he didn't do that. He said, "I want you to be where you are. I want you to be in the world where I have put you. But I want there to be this distinction between it and you." The New Testament uses the term world over and over again, and it's not describing an astrological reality, a planetary reality, or even a dividing wall reality in our world. It is that reality that the world is everybody that is outside of Christ. I mean, that's the line in the sand. It is the cross that's the line in the sand, and you are either in Christ or you are of the world. And so he said, I want that line to be clear, to be distinct, so that you stand out. You are distinct from them. How so? Salt of the earth. Salt was a precious commodity, not overly easy to come by. It was bartered with, traded with. It could be a very valuable commodity because they realized how valuable it was in everyday life. Now, we primarily think of salt as an additive to our food. Most food is bland without salt. Some of you are on low salt or no salt diets. You have to use salt substitutes, and they all stink. There's no substitute for sodium chloride. I mean, it just works. It is a good enhancer of flavor. I mean, a bowl of oatmeal without salt is horrible. A pot of peas that have so much potential without salt is bad. Grandma's dressing recipe without salt is no good. It's bland. It's not as tasteful as it could be. It is an enhancer of flavor. And that's the way we think of it. But that was not, I don't think that was their first thought. They didn't have the Frigidaire, the LG, the Maytag, the Whirlpool to keep their food fresh. They had salt. And so they would salt down their meat, and when they salted down their meat, it arrested the decay of the meat. It stopped it from rotting, preserved it so that it would last longer, so that you wouldn't lose the usefulness of that particular meat. And so there would be barrels of salt, and I've never seen that. I mean, I had great-grandparents that were alive when I was born, and they did all kind of cool stuff. My great-grandfather was a village blacksmith, and he still had most of those implements in his car shed when I was a kid. And we'd go out, and I'd get to watch him do some of his stuff, and it was absolutely entertaining. I can remember vividly hog killing day in the fall, when that good cold snap, when the hogs had got to the right weight. And, I mean, it was a bit traumatic. I mean, I had some nights where I couldn't sleep for a few weeks, but it was a hoot to watch them gather up those full-grown hogs in that little pen. And my uncle, the sharpshooter in the family, would pull out the .22 and with a delicately placed shot would, and then would come disemboweling and then dipping it in that 55-gallon barrel of boiling hot water and then scraping the hair off and then frying the fresh cracklings and then the meat being cut up and put in that smokehouse. Oh my goodness, it was absolutely marvelous, but I never saw any of them pack meat away in a barrel with salt. That was a little bit before their time. Pack it in there, and later on pull it out, wash it off, cook it, and eat it, preserved. Jesus is looking at them and saying to them, you are that. It is decay. You are preservation. It is bland. It is tasteless spiritually. I mean, it's an exciting world. There are a lot of good things out there. I mean, all of us who've jumped up and down in pulpits and said, sin is bad, sin is bad, sin is bad, sin is bad. We've made it sound as if you sin, you're going to be miserable. That is not the case. Sin is fun. Right? Y'all are afraid to admit it. It's not. If sin made you miserable right off the bat, we would have a lot better chance of being successful in the church. It does not. I mean, it's fun in the beginning. The misery comes later. The wages of sin is death. Sin, when it's finished, bringeth forth death. But in the beginning, it is a hoot. And that's why it sells so well. But the world is in decay as a result of sin. And salt stands in stark contrast to that as that element that is able to arrest that decay and to preserve it, and also to make the world a more tasteful place spiritually because of Jesus. You're the salt of the earth. You're the light of the world. That one's a lot easier. It's a whole lot easier. If we, we don't have the ability to hit a switch and plunge this room into total darkness. Seth, you got a switch right there, don't you? Just hit the switch that gets us as close to dark as we can get. Let's just do that for just a moment. See, I mean, we can't even get total darkness in here because of the screens and because of the exit lights. But it's dark enough right now, and you're so accustomed to the light that if one of you needed to get up and go right now, it'd be trouble. You'd probably stumble all over yourself and the people around you. There is a stark contrast between darkness and light. Let's turn them back on. Better, right? Light pierces the darkness. Light shows us what is. Light illuminates the way so that we can make progress. Sharp distinction between the darkness and the light. Jesus is challenging this group of disciples. Please, 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 do not ever succumb to the temptation to blend in with the world. Don't become so enamored with the world's approval that you want to be like it. You want to be accepted by it. You want to be one of them. You just want to be lost in the world so that they don't really recognize that you're a church. Y'all, it's so tempting to develop that mindset when we're so anxious about getting people to come to church and they tell us, I don't like church. Oh, then how can we get you to come? Well, let's do church in a way that doesn't look like church. Let's camouflage the church so that we can surprise you when you get there, and somewhere along the way we're going to go, surprise, and be the church without you even realizing it. I mean, there's all kind of instructions for that in the Bible, right? About blending in, about camouflaging ourselves so well that the world doesn't even recognize that we are here. Most of you in this room, men and women, probably have camouflage clothing in your closet. Some of you don't. I realize that. You're going to just look at me and go, you're nuts. But most of you do. I mean, you women, you can buy it in pink even, which to me, that's such a contradiction. Pink camouflage. Where are you going to be hunting? In a 1950s bathroom that has pink tile on the wall, you'll blend in well there, but nowhere else. But we got all this stuff that allows us to blend in. That is not the purpose of the church, to blend in with the world. We are to be distinct from it. But how so? Our efforts at being distinctive have come in some weird forms. We've tried dress, we've tried lifestyle distinctives that would make us stand out from the so-called world. We have prescribed behaviors that we think would be distinctive, and again, we're checking off that list. Do this, don't do this, do this, don't do that. I mean, I grew up in your typical Baptist home in a very conservative Baptist situation, and I grew up, I told you before, y'all know my history. I mean, my grandfather was old school, and as Baptists, we did not play any game that had a dice or cards. No game. You could play anything else, but you couldn't play games that had dice or cards. Well, what does that leave? Mumbly peg? We learned that when you go out in the backyard and you throw a pocket knife between your brother's legs to see how close you can come to his feet. I wasn't very good. A lot of bloody toes involved. Anyway, we learned early on that when we were going to Mama and Papa's that we couldn't take the Wahoo board for one. That was such a great game. We couldn't take the Wahoo board. We couldn't take the Yahtzee game. And that was such a good one. It was very small, compact, not even travel Yahtzee. Just 5 dice and a scorecard. Couldn't take that. Papa would come unglued. And we couldn't go to movies. Couldn't go to the theater. I think that's what stigmatized me. Because for him, the movie house was the devil's home. My dad learned that. I told you that story. Papa went in one day when Dad was on a date, took a girl to a movie, and Papa went in mid-movie and found Daddy and said, "Don't you ever park my car in front of this hellhole ever again." And so I think that was the last date with that girl. Anyway, that's kind of how I grew up. And certainly dancing was out of the question. You didn't dance. Only loose women danced. Dr. Stagg, you grew up the same way. Your daddy taught you the same thing. Dwayne, Betty, right? Y'all heard that stuff. You didn't go to dances. Openly. Did you meet Catherine at a dance? Wasn't that where y'all met? Oh, I didn't think. I'm sorry. That's a different story. We try to make our self-distinctive by what we didn't do. And Jesus' distinction wasn't the list of what you don't do, it was who you were as a result of your relationship with Jesus Christ. Did that affect your choices? Absolutely. Did it have an impact on your lifestyle? Without question. But it wasn't that he was so concerned about you shall not do this, you shall not do that, you shall not go here, you shall not go there. He just said, blessed are the, now you will be the salt of the earth and the light of the world. Point number 2. Both salt and light are worthless if they are not dispensed. The temptation would have been to withdraw. Circle the wagons, build the walls high, put razor wire around the walls because they're going to be out to get us. And we play the victim a lot these days in the church. Oh, we are just being beset by the enemies, by the socialists, by the humanists. We're being beset by the liberals. We're being beset by the courts. We're being beset by the legislature. We're being beset by the governors. We're being beset by the president. Oh, woe is me. What do we expect? They are the world. We're the body of Christ. We're not to withdraw and hide behind high walls and razor wire. He said, be the salt and be the light. And the only way salt works is if you pour it out. I mean, you can have 3 canisters of Morton salt in your cabinet right next to your stove. That's where ours is, right here in the cabinet, right here next to the stove. And those peas can be cooking on top of that stove. And you can think all day long, well, the salt was right there. It was in the neighborhood. Surely it's going to affect those peas. I can't believe they don't taste better than this because the salt was right there in the cabinet. Why didn't it just know and jump down into those peas? It didn't know because it needed to be poured out. So do we need to be poured out into the world. I mean, our Christian life isn't all about gathering and doing here in this building. It's about gathering, worshiping, being fired up, and then going out into the world where we live. And pouring out this character of life, this quality of life, into that situation where we are so that we can arrest that decay, so that because of the power of God through us, we arrest that process of rotting that is going on and allow life and lives to be changed. Light. He's thinking of a lamp, more so than a flashlight or flipping a switch on the wall. They had no concept of that. But who takes that lamp and hides it under a basket or puts it under the bed? Nobody. I mean, if you want light, you put it in the place where it's going to do the most good. You know that. When the power goes out and you have to rely on your emergency flashlight or those candles that you use only when the power goes out, you don't light one and go put it in your closet and close the door. That wouldn't make any sense. You bring it into a high place in your house where it can give light to the most part of the house. You are the salt of the earth and you are the light of the world. Be poured out. Be used in that place that God has given you. Be present in that place that God has given you. Unashamedly live the life that I've called you to live. Be that person who is committed to the holiness of God in your life and demonstrate that. Pour that out onto the lives of the people who are around you and into the situations that you find yourself in. That is not, to me, there's not an obnoxiousness about that. I've known plenty of obnoxious Christians. Some would call them good witnesses. I'd call them mercenaries. They go after people with a vengeance, hammer them, and make them feel horrifically uncomfortable. Just browbeat them, beat them down with a gospel presentation until they either run for their life, turn the lights out, lock the door, or relent and say, tell me what I need to say to get you out of my hair. The gospel isn't obnoxious. Offensive, yes, because at some point you have to decide what you're going to do with it. But I'm convinced as I watch the ministry of Jesus Christ that he probably was one of the most winsome people that ever walked the face of the earth. Now, did he have some run-ins with some folk? You bet he did. Well, if we could have talked to those people that got run out of the temple that day, they'd have probably said he's not a very nice person. But he was able to sit down with Zacchaeus. He was able to nurture and shape and mold Peter and James and John. He was able to have a conversation with a woman who had been caught in the act of adultery. And there was such an ease about him that he could be truthful, he could have integrity, he could not compromise, and yet make them feel of value and worth. To me, that's who we are to be as we're poured out into the world as both salt and light. Not firebrand radicals who turn people off and make them want to run for the exit, but people who demonstrate the love of God and Jesus Christ in such a way that it makes a profound difference. Well, that's the last part of it, the goal of our involvement with the world. As we're being poured out, as we are being present in our world. I mean, something's going to happen. Salt of the earth. There's going to be an arresting of the decay. I think that's going to be the primary purpose, an arresting of the putrefaction caused by sin. We have the potential to make our communities better places to live because of Christ in us. And that's not just about getting legislation passed. It's not just about electing the right candidates. It's about Christian people being Christian in their community. It makes a difference. It makes a difference. Don't be ashamed of it. Don't shy away from it. Just go ahead and live Jesus, follow Jesus in that place where he has given you, and it's going to make a difference. Now, will it make the place better at the same time, in addition to arresting decay? Absolutely. I think the presence of people who are following after Christ makes any situation better because of Jesus in us, not because of our winning ways. Light in the darkness. I like that picture because I really believe our American culture is spending a lot of time in the dark, groping. You've done it. I've done it. It's not pleasant, y'all. When you can't see clearly and you're still trying to move along and function, and you either catch your big toe or your pinky toe. And it takes an abrupt turn from the rest of its family on your foot. Goes in a different direction. And you're hopping around in the darkness, unable to find anything solid to grab hold of, or not able to find a soft landing spot. So the next thing you know, you're on the floor. And you've grabbed onto things and they're falling in on top of you. And you're using words that you thought you'd forgotten. No, they're still there. Your unregenerate state comes back to the top all of a sudden. It's there because you are in the dark. Some of you have gotten dressed in the dark. Some of you got dressed in the dark tonight. Look at yourself. We put on things thinking they match and they don't match. We put on things and they're comfortable. They don't even go together. People who come to church with a black shoe and a brown shoe, with a blue shoe and a black shoe, because in the dark they looked close. We turn on the light. We can see the way more clearly. We can see truth more clearly. And there's hope. Even Tom Bodette said, we'll leave a light on so that you can find your way. Great picture, wasn't it? We don't forget it. We are to be that light left on in the darkness. So somebody out there who is desperate and trying to find their way can find their way to Christ. Jesus said, I want you to be that group of people. Not a bunch of eclectic weirdos who are hiding out, afraid for your life, but I want you to be that group of people who are poured out in your community as salt and light. And I want us to make a profound impact on our world. How salty are you? How bright is your light?